Yeah, there's no other day.
Okay, so we don't have any days that we're missing a week, any weeks that we're not missing a day.
No, but you may remember, I think it's this coming Monday, that I've got a dental appointment that's at like
On Monday?
I've got a dental appointment, I think it's at 3 o'clock or something. So we may have to stop around 2:30 or so. It's out in Lakewood, so takes me a while to get there.
Okay, on the 23rd. Thank you.
I think that was the date. Let me,
I wasn't sure if it was that day or if it was the 30th.
yeah, no. I think that's the date. Let's see if I have it on my calendar here. Well, I don't have it there. Yes, the 23rd. So Monday. Monday the 23rd. There's a little green light on here. I don't know that she's turned the thing on yet. When Hannah does that, we'll be set. Let's hope. Apparently there was some problem with the audio when video clips and stuff were being played coming out over the live stream. And my understanding is some of our IT folks, Antonio was here this morning and announces that that's been repaired, or at least made to work. So well, I guess we'll see. Morning, everyone. Welcome back. Please be seated, everyone. Okay. We're resuming with a cross-examination of Mr. Fricke. Do you need to turn anything on there, Hannah? Is it all set? Okay. Ms. Fricke, when you're ready.
All right. Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, Ms. Mallang.
Hi.
Did I pronounce that correctly?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I don't want to have you be belabored on the stand here or me belabor things, but I do need to ask several more questions. And first, one thing I forgot to ask yesterday, when we went over the interviews, you had done the 3 interviews, remember that?
Yes.
By various parties. And then you indicated you had an opportunity to review all of those transcripts of those interviews before testifying yesterday, right?
Yes.
Within the last month or so, whenever it was.
Mm-hmm.
And after reviewing those, were there any corrections that you thought you had to make?
I do not believe so.
Okay, so they appeared accurate,
Yes.
and you were able to use those at least in part to refresh some of your recollections. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Okay. And when you were doing the interviews, and particularly when you were doing the interview with myself and Mr. Bone, you mentioned yesterday, for instance, that you suffer from a little bit of anxiety in front of big crowds, right?
Yes.
Was that a low-stress environment for you?
It was still somewhat stressful, but
Right. But you didn't feel compelled to say anything just to say it. Is that fair to say?
yes, that's fair to say.
Okay. And it was an information-gathering process, like all the interviews. Is that
Yes.
accurate? Good. So I'm going to we'll start. I'm going to bring up, if I may, again, exhibit number 22 that was played yesterday. And I believe that's your first video from your phone.
Okay.
Remember that? And while that's getting keyed up, on all these interviews that you've done, Mr. Bible was not present, right?
No, he was not present.
And you didn't have any contact with Mr. Bible, is that accurate?
I did not have direct contact, no.
And so you've never, you've never discussed your testimony with Mr. Bible, is that accurate?
No, I've not.
Okay. And your phone that you took these videos on, you took two, right?
Yes.
So you took two videos. Your phone still exists, right?
Yes, it's been replaced, but yes.
Right. It was never broken.
No, it was never broken.
And whoever, at least when you had it, other than being replaced, if someone wanted to access your phone with your permission, of course, they could have done that as part of this case.
Yes.
Okay. So, if we can play, this is your first video, right? Exhibit 22?
Yes, I believe so. It's over on that screen, not
Oh,
right
is that
here.
why you're, okay. I think can we pull it up on this first screen as well?
Nothing's happened. Oh, here we go.
We're good?
Yes.
If you can play that, Ms. English.
There's somebody in the middle of that doggy pile.
Okay, we pause it right there. You know, the statement you made about something related to a doggy pile,
Yes.
that didn't mean to suggest that there was an actual pile on it, is that right?
No, it was more of a figure of speech.
Okay, people were standing around
Yes.
at this point.
There were some that were down with the man and some that were around, yes.
Okay. Now, when we talked yesterday, and you might need the pointer here, we used, I believe, at least initially, and if she could stand up, Your Honor, and approach the. Okay. If I recall correctly, this is from the main window in your room. Is that correct?
Yes, the front window.
And the left side of that front window.
Yes, part of the video is spanning across the top of the windows, and I believe that part of the video starts in the middle of the top middle window and goes over.
Okay. And you indicated, of course, there's another exhibit where you drew in the location of the police officer and Mr. Ellis. But this point shows you what you could see in front of the vehicle, correct?
Yes, at this point.
And then you indicated that you couldn't see directly in front of the right headlight, which would be the passenger side headlight, correct?
Yes, it's even less able to see from this point of view because this is more to the side of the vehicle, whereas my side window is more towards the front of the vehicle.
Okay. And then I think you indicated you certainly couldn't see the grill immediately in front of the grill of the vehicle.
Yes, I could not see that.
Okay. And so, as far as number one, the police officer, were you able to see his whole body?
At which point?
When you first saw him?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Ellis, were you able to see his whole body?
He was slightly to the side of the officer, so I could see from the torso up.
Okay, and plus, would his legs been blocked by the vehicle from your angle?
Both the vehicle and the police body next to him.
Okay, both of them. And so, your perception at the time is there was only one officer.
Yes.
Right. And just for the record, and maybe I don't need you to stand up, and I apologize for that at the moment, but we'll keep this up. Your perception was that there was only one officer, and as you indicated, that is your perception. Well, yesterday you said it was still your perception.
Yes.
And today it's still your perception.
Yes, because I only ever saw one officer's body at a time.
Right. Now, do you recall what the build of that officer was?
I do not recall.
Okay. If there was an officer on the ground who had been body slammed, which was covered by that car, on the other side of Mr. Ellis, you, of course, wouldn't be able to see him. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that statement.
And in which, again, you know from what you've seen since and heard since, there's, at least at the beginning, there were two officers there, right?
Yes, I'm aware at this point that there were two officers.
And so that second officer, we know was somewhere, even though he wasn't in your view.
Yes.
Okay. And the first officer you saw, standing there at the front corner of the car, You assumed at that time, and assume today, that that officer was the driver of the vehicle. Is that fair to say?
Yes,
Okay, but you never saw him get out of the car.
I did not.
So whether he was or whether he wasn't, you don't know.
Yes.
You agree with that, right? And so, and then yesterday when you testified on direct, well, let me strike that, getting back. And so when Mr. Ellis fell, you don't know how he fell.
He fell about 1.5 feet in front, so I could see his legs on the ground, but his body was partially obstructed by the vehicle.
Right. And I didn't word that very clearly. What I meant to say or meant to ask is, you don't know how he went to the ground.
It looked like it was during the struggle that he went to the ground.
And as you indicated in your various statements, it was during, as you perceived it, him trying to get away from that, in your perception, the one officer.
Yes, during the twisting away.
Correct. And you don't know if he tripped
I do not know.
or fell
I could not see his legs at that point, so I would not be able to tell you.
or pulled down.
Yes.
And if the other officer, for instance, is on the ground and grabbed his shirt and pulled him down, that wouldn't be visible to you.
It would not have been.
Okay. And you certainly don't know if that officer, well, this first officer was trying to protect his partner who may have been on the ground. You understand my question?
I would not.
Is that your answer?
Yes.
I would not.
I would not know.
Okay, got it. Now, you also indicated on direct yesterday, and you were using your handwritten exhibit to, I think you're a little nervous then. And by the way, again, if you need to take a break, let the judge know, okay?
Okay.
You indicated that you did see one officer directing traffic.
Yes.
Okay. Now, when you said that, was that at the time when there were only one car there?
Do you mean the police officer's car, or do you mean?
I mean the police cars, correct.
Yes. At that time, there was only one police officer's car.
Okay. And is that what you're referencing when you, using your notes, when you said, the officer stepped to the side of the police vehicle into the turn lane and directed the cars to drive around and move along?
Yes.
Is that a different officer from the one that you saw in front of the vehicle?
I would not be able to tell you which of the officers that it was.
Okay. Now you say which of the officers, so are you saying that now you know there's two at that point?
At this point in time, I'm aware that there was two.
Okay. And so, but again, the rest of the officers that are depicted in this last frame of your video, they weren't there yet, is that?
They were not there
The
yet.
numbers weren't there, I should say, correct?
They were not there.
And so, did you ever watch the Vivint video, the doorbell camera from your residence?
I believe that I reviewed it before it was turned over, or after it was turned over, sometime within that period.
Right, and listen to the audio as part of that?
Yes, the audio is part of the video.
When that person who's in that video, who's directing traffic, is that the person you're indicating was a police officer?
Yes.
Okay.
Unless you're talking about the man that was on the sidewalk.
I'm talking about the man that you said was directing traffic.
Okay. The one that was in the turn lane directing traffic, yes.
Okay.
I saw one of my neighbors on the sidewalk that also came out and started directing traffic at some point.
Okay. Was that after
That
the
was
officer was directing traffic or before the officer was directing traffic?
I believe that was after more of the police units had arrived, but it might have been slightly before then.
Okay. I mean, you're under a lot of stress observing this, I would assume. And obviously, that you weren't able to, at least initially, see two officers that you can recall, right?
Right. Because I never saw both of their bodies next to each other at the same time.
Okay. And that's at any time?
Not at any time during that.
And by the way, you indicated when you started hearing this, and is that a fair characterization as far as your attention to the street, that was from yelling that you were hearing, is that right?
I was hearing raised voices, yes.
Yeah, two male voices, I think you said, right?
I do believe, yes.
And how long that car, those two individuals that you heard were interacting, you have no idea.
Between 30 seconds to a minute.
From when you heard them.
Yes.
They were there earlier for 15, 30 seconds, and it wasn't loud. You didn't necessarily hear them. You understand?
If it wouldn't have been making a noise to call my attention, yes, I wouldn't have heard it.
Right. But when it was loud enough, it got your attention, and you looked out the window.
Yes.
And I think you said, I don't know if your husband or your then fiance was asleep or was lying down, but he didn't witness anything. Is that accurate?
He did not witness anything.
And your parents weren't living there?
My parents were living there. They were out of town.
Correct. Sorry. Thank you very much. And your kids, they didn't witness anything?
No, they did not.
But your brother did?
I do not know what he witnessed.
But are you aware that he witnessed part of this?
Yes.
Okay. And do you know where he was located when you got up to then witness whatever, or see whatever you could see?
His room is up in the attic, so my understanding is that he may have tried to view from his window up there in the attic, and then he came out to the porch.
Okay, and that's depicted in the Vivint video, right, when your brother's out on the porch?
Yes.
Okay. So when his attention was drawn to it, you don't know?
I do not know.
Okay. Whether it was before it got your attention or after it got your attention, fair to say?
Accurate, yes.
And the two of you haven't talked about it, is that fair to say as well?
Yes, we have not discussed it.
Okay. So, in his position, which is the floor above you in the attic, he would have a more, well, have you been to that room?
Yes, I have.
Have you looked out that window?
Yes, but when he had it set up, he had a different air conditioning unit in the window than the one that's in the pictures displayed.
All right.
And I do believe that his partially blocked and obstructed the upper window as well.
Okay. But he would be able to see out there if he...
So I'm not sure. I have not seen from his perspective from when his room was set up there.
Let's say if you could see out that window, would you be able to see more of what was going on in front of that vehicle as opposed to if you're on the lower floor where you're located, if you know?
I think it would be about the same view, but from from a higher standpoint.
Right. So, front of the vehicle, and I certainly won't put words in your mouth, might be less of a barrier as far as one's sight line went. Is that fair to say? Or do you disagree?
While they're standing, yes. Okay. It would be about the same viewpoint, because from up there he wouldn't be able to see the legs, or from the legs down. But if they were on the ground, I don't know if he would be able to see that or not.
Okay, fair enough. Now, you indicated yesterday that you heard the voices, and initially you didn't necessarily hear words. Is that fair to say?
I did not hear clear, direct words.
Correct. And later on, I think you testified to the state. You heard well, first of all, it's unclear to me. You said you heard Mr. Ellis at one point on a couple occasions say stop.
Yes.
You never had any connection with Mr. Ellis, is that correct?
I did not have a connection, no.
And certainly you didn't know what his voice sounded like.
No.
And you don't know the officers, correct?
No.
And you don't know what their voice sounds like.
I do not.
And when you heard stop, whoever said it, what made you believe now, you didn't know the name of the person, but what makes you believe it was Mr. Ellis saying that as opposed to one of the officers?
I have since then I have seen the Vivint camera.
Okay.
And it's easier to attach the voices to who it is when you're watching them.
Okay. And you didn't hear any orders given by the police?
I do not recall any orders.
Is that true today?
Yes.
Is that true after listening to the Vivint and watching the Vivint audio and camera?
I do not recall.
And so if we can bring up exhibit number 546. And while that's happening, so again, I said unclear how many times you heard, which you now know as Mr. Ellis saying, "I can't breathe." Do you recall?
Four to 5 times.
Okay. And do you recall in your first interview with the Pierce County Sheriff's Office indicating that you had heard 2 distinct sets of "I can't breathe" and they were about 3 to 4 minutes apart? Does that ring a bell?
Yes.
Okay. And when you said sets, what were you referring to?
Repeated them.
How many times?
I do not recall, but I believe 3 to 4.
In each set?
I believe that the first time it would have been 1 to 2, and then the second time 3 to 4.
Okay. You're not certainly not deviating that it was 2 separate sets.
Yeah, as far as I can remember.
Okay, and I'm using your words. I mean, you remember reading that over, reviewing your transcripts here in the last couple of weeks?
I did not go line for line, and there's a lot to review.
Granted, I get it. Would you like to refresh your recollection by looking at the transcript? Would that help you?
No, that's okay.
Okay, all right. So, and one thing you recall, though, is that as far as hearing I'm going to use your words, the first set, that was when he was on the ground, right?
I do believe. Yes, I do believe.
Okay, you believe so. And that's what you told the Pierce County Sheriff's detectives who interviewed you on June 7th, correct?
Yes.
I should say June 7th, 2020. And so when you saw him standing up in front of the car, you didn't hear that? Him say, "I can't breathe."
No, I do not believe.
Okay. And you described yesterday on direct that you, when he was standing up, he said, "Stop." And he was yelling pretty loudly, right?
Yes.
And then you said you heard a grunt, but you described it in that interview, actually. What you said, it was a grunt like when you hold someone against their will and they're trying to get away, like he was straining. Is that a fair characterization?
Yes.
And that's how you described it to the detective back in June of 2020?
Yes.
Okay. But you didn't hear the officers give any orders?
I do not recall that.
Okay. Is that ready to, if we could play exhibit number 546 and ask you to pay attention to that, both the video and the audio.
Oh my God! Stop it! 717, go ahead. Oh my God, that was so scary! Hey, yo, the world was there! You got kids in the car, you dumb ass, you already know.
717. 9-6 majors. Alright, traffic Henry 317 on control 969, we're 2622.
They killed him. Go around the
You can't hear it there, right?
Henry 317 unreadable.
It's hard to hear over the overlapping.
Yeah, and you don't have the advantage of having expertise in critical hearing, for instance, right?
No.
Not many of us do, I would suggest. But at any rate, is that what you heard?
Yes.
Okay. did you actually see that struggle as depicted in 546?
It is hard to determine from that point of view.
Okay, that's fine. Is it consistent with what you saw?
Yes, a bit of the struggle, yes.
Okay. And did you saw the taser being pointed and fired? Did you see that?
Yes.
Okay. Did you remember seeing that taser? I know you said you heard it on a couple of, I think you said 2 or 3 times yesterday. But did you actually see it being fired?
I believe I saw it in their hand and I heard it being fired.
Okay. And when you saw it in the person's hand, that's the same officer you would have seen at the front of the vehicle on the driver's side at the very beginning. Is that correct?
I do not know how to identify the officers. I recognize them as being a man in uniform, the officer.
Right. But I mean, your perception, of course, as you indicated, has always been there was one there.
Yes.
So I'm assuming, again, I don't want to put words in your mouth, if there's only one that you recall there, that would be the same officer who had the taser in his hand and would have been in the front of the vehicle. Is that fair to say?
I would not give that characterization because I cannot distinguish if when one officer came into view, it was the same officer that I saw from the beginning because I only saw one officer at a time, and I identified them by the uniform.
Okay. Right. And I don't know, you don't recall the builds of the officers. Is that accurate?
No.
Okay. And when you woke up, you actually, again, you heard the noises, and you also woke up to the police lights flashing. Is that right?
I was not quite asleep yet. I had just laid down to go to bed.
Fair enough. But when you caught your attention, it was both the noise and the police lights. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And do you know if they're red and blues or yellow lights?
I do not recall. I believe it was red and blues, but it could have been the yellow.
A couple things here. Just a couple more things, Ms. Mallang. At the time of this, I mean, you indicated yesterday, number one, you had taken self-defense lessons of some sort.
No, that I had looked into self-defense devices.
Okay, and it was during the course of looking into that, you had some experience of hearing a taser and knowing what that sounds like.
Yes.
And one of the things when you first started in all your interviews, you initially, you thought this was an arrest and someone was trying to get away from the arrest.
Yes.
And that person was struggling and actually ran from the arrest at one point. Is that right?
I did not see him run. I saw him trying to twist away and get free of the grip.
Right. And then you saw, you indicated you saw the one officer kick Mr. Ellis.
Yes.
And do you recall actually in one of your interviews saying you didn't actually see a kick connect?
I do not recall.
Okay. Would it help you to refresh your recollection if that were provided to you?
Yes.
Let me get my note here. And as I'm getting this, I apologize. I'm going to hand you, or ask you to look at, exhibit number. Okay, I think it's out of order. Exhibit number 2919, if I may approach, Your Honor. I'm going to ask you, Ms. Mallang, if you would go to page number 1, page 17. Tell me when you have that in front of you. And just for the record, that's the transcript of the interview that you did along with me and the investigator Ron Bone, correct? And if I can direct you down to lines 23 to 25. Read that to yourself. You see that? Ms. Lang, do you see that?
Yes, I see that.
In that interview, do you agree that, well, first of all, is that refresh your recollection?
Yes.
And did you indicate during that interview that in fact you didn't see him make contact?
In the interview, I stated that I did not see where it hit, but that I could see that it clearly hit and made contact, and I knew that his body was there.
Right. What you said is because it stopped, so you based on it stopping.
It stopped with an impact.
Right, but you couldn't see the impact.
No, I could not see where the foot landed.
Okay. And is it possible your perception was that he didn't kick at all? Is that possible?
Is it possible I didn't see him kick at all?
Let me rephrase that. Is it possible that you saw Mr. Ellis kicking?
No,
And you're sure of that?
I'm sure of that.
Okay. And so during this time frame, it's fair to say, again, when you were taking these classes, is that because in part the neighborhoods, and I'll grab that from you if I may, the neighborhoods got some crime issues going on? Is that part of why you at least had some interest in self-defense classes?
No, and it was not self-defense classes. It was a self-defense device. The reason being because I have a history of, I had a relationship that was domestic violence related.
I understood. Okay. And so, but you did, in these interviews, indicate that you've seen a lot of different things happen out in your area there in the neighborhood, right?
Yes.
From drive-by shootings to drug offenses and a whole variety of things.
Yes.
Over the years, right? And in that context, you thought, based on, in part, what you were at least initially witnessing and the history that you had been part of, that this was just a person trying to escape an arrest.
Yes.
And when you did that first interview, and you're certainly have been active in racial justice issues, right?
Yes.
And so, and it's certainly something that's very important to you, which it should be to everybody.
Yes.
I would say. And so it's not as if you have a bias of helping cops or anything like that.
No.
And you certainly recognize police are important as well.
Yes.
And so your statements that you made here today, made during these interviews, certainly weren't colored in the sense of trying to favor anybody. Is that fair to say?
It was not in favoring anyone.
Okay. You're just telling it like what you perceived at that particular.
Yes.
Right. I think that's all I have. Give me one moment, if I may, Your Honor. That's all I have, ma'am.
Okay.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay, Mr. Osler.
Morning, Ms. Mallang. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, thanks. I want to focus on this timeline because you've been very consistent in your several interviews about what was transpiring in relation to what you were doing. Do you remember walking through that on each of these interviews we've had?
Yes.
All right. And so, if I understand correctly, you and your fiance had laid down on March 3rd, 2020 to go to sleep.
Yes. My fiance was already asleep, and I was finishing shutting down the house and laying down myself.
Right, and what you've told everybody is that you've been laying down for about 10 minutes. Does that seem ballpark accurate?
Yes.
And that you had kind of dozed off.
Started to drift off, yes.
Okay. And so as you're drifting off, you heard this commotion outside, right?
Yes.
And at first, not a big deal because this is something that you'd probably heard multiple times over the course of your 17 years living there.
Yes.
And so you laid there for a period of time to see if that stopped. Do you remember saying that?
Yeah, about 30 to 60 seconds, yes.
Right, and what you've said at every interview is that you laid there for about 30 or 60 seconds listening to the commotion, right?
Yes.
To see if it stopped.
Yeah.
And when it didn't stop after the 30 to 60 seconds, you decided to get up and kind of take a peek out that window that's directly above your bed, right?
Yes.
All right. And you don't know if that commotion started before the 30 or 60 seconds. That's just when it first caught your attention. Is that right?
That's accurate.
Right. And so I think we saw a photo yesterday of you kind of sitting on your knees looking out the window.
Mm-hmm.
Is that...
Yes, that would be how I was kneeling.
Okay. And so what you've said at every interview is as you're kneeling, looking out that window, you see the interaction between the driver officer and Mr. Ellis. Is that right?
Yes.
And in every interview you've said that you sat in that location, looking out the window, observing that interaction for 45 or 60, between 45 and 60 seconds, right?
I do believe, but I am not entirely sure about the timeline, or like it was guessing second amounts after a period of time from the incident.
Well, that's why I want to be very specific.
Yes.
What you told the officers, Detective Rue, who asked you many questions about this timeline, right?
Yes.
And what you told Detective Rue was that I sat in that position for at least 45 seconds, but maybe up to 60 seconds. Do you remember saying that?
Yes.
Okay. Is that accurate?
I don't entirely recall the amount of length of time that I was in front of that window, but if I had to recollect, I think that it would be slightly lower than that time.
Okay. I'll get back to that time frame in just a second, okay? As you're sitting on your knees looking out that window, you see the driver officer trying to grab or restrain Mr. Ellis. Is that fair?
Yes.
And is that when you see Mr. Ellis twisting away from the driver officer?
Yes.
And he's in the location that you told us yesterday at the front left driver's side headlight, right?
Yes.
And Mr. Ellis is in that location too.
Yes.
They're together.
Mm-hmm.
And is the officer actually physically grabbing Mr. Ellis at that point in time?
Yes.
And you've described on multiple occasions that Mr. Ellis is either twisting away, spinning away, or kind of flailing away from that location.
Yes, pulling
Is that
away.
accurate?
Yes.
Okay. And they're still in front of that driver's side front headlight area.
Yes.
And that's during that time period where you're up looking through. We'll talk about what you've tested or what you've said previously about 45 to 60 seconds during that time period.
Yes.
All right. you sat up to look out the window, the yellow amber lights on the vehicle were already on, weren't they?
There were lights on, I believe. I could not recall which of the lights were on.
Okay. Might have been the yellow ones or might have been the red or blue.
Yes.
But you certainly saw the bar of lights on top of the vehicle illuminated at that point, right?
Yes, I believe.
All right, and they're still in front of the vehicle. Do I understand that?
Yes.
But you didn't see the driver's door open at all, right?
No, I did not.
All right, so the driver's presumably already out of the vehicle by the time you sit up and look?
Yes.
Okay. The officer that you saw in that location that we just talked about, do you remember if he was wearing a baseball cap or a beanie? Do you know the difference?
I do not recall what he had on his head.
Okay. Could you tell if he had something on his head?
I could not.
Okay.
That's not where my attention was.
Fair enough. Didn't make an observation either way. Weren't paying attention to that.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fair. All right. So, I suggested that you had reported consistently over the 3 interviews this 45 to 60-second period through which you're watching this occur. Okay. I'm going to show you, with the court's permission, Plaintiff's Exhibit 866. That is a transcript of your February 3rd, 2021 interview with the Washington State Patrol Detective Rue. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Okay. May I approach, Judge? Go ahead and orient yourself to that, and I want you to have oriented yourself. Go ahead and look up at me.
What did you want me to focus on?
Oh, just that you understand what that document is. Do you see that's a transcript of that interview?
Yes.
Okay. And Ms. Mallang, if you could turn to page 17 of that document for me.
All right.
All right. And on lines 15 and 16, do you see the question? Do you recall how long you were at the side window watching what was going on before you moved away from that window? Do you see that question?
Yes.
And your response was, I was probably there for less than a minute, right?
Yes.
And then the detective tries to clarify exactly how long we're talking about, right?
Yes.
Says, so a minute is 60 seconds. Do you think you were watching what was going on from your bedroom window for about 60 seconds? That was his question, right?
Mm-hmm.
And do you remember looking at that? Your response was 45, 60 seconds about.
Yes.
Okay. And obviously you're trying to give as accurate as information as you can to the detectives that are investigating this, right?
Yes.
All right. So what you said then and what you said at every other interview was between 45 and 60 seconds. Is that right?
Yes, I believe.
And what you actually told them is you watched for about 30 seconds from that location before you saw Mr. Ellis go to the ground. Do you remember saying that?
Yes, I believe.
Okay. And that in that same conversation about watching for 30 seconds before Mr. Ellis falls to the ground, you'd indicated that you have no idea how long this had been going on before that, only that you heard it about a minute and a half before you observed that.
Yes, I did not see how the commotion began.
Okay. All right. And it was at that point that you told the detectives, and I think you testified to, that you are kneeling on the bed and you lean down and try to wake up your fiance.
Yes.
Is that accurate?
Yes.
Okay. So 30 seconds to a minute, another 45 to 60 seconds go by, and you try to wake up your fiance at that point.
Yes.
Okay. It was at that point, after you attempted to wake up your fiance, that you went over to the front window of your bedroom. Is that right?
Yes, that's when the woman's voice drew my attention. I went over towards the front.
You read my mind, okay? So you try to wake up your fiance, and you hear the woman at that point scream, "Stop, just arrest him. Stop, just arrest him."
I do not recall that was what was said.
You heard her screaming.
Yes.
After you're trying to wake up your fiance.
as I'm trying to wake up my fiance.
Thank you for correcting me. And then you said it took 15 seconds about from when you're trying to wake him up and hearing that voice that you went over to that front window that we've seen on the last exhibit.
Yes, it would be from going from my bed, off of my bed, over to the window, lifting up the blind and looking. So within a 15-second span.
Fair enough. And it was at that point that you've described at every interview that you actually saw the woman in the car directly behind the patrol car, halfway out of her vehicle, right?
Either leaning out the window or partially out of her vehicle, yes.
And at that point, you're hearing what you just described, the screaming.
Mm-hmm.
And she turns back to the car behind her and starts yelling at the car behind her, right?
Yes.
So about at least 2 minutes of interaction, you're either hearing or seeing before the yelling from the lady in the car, right?
Yes, I believe.
All right. If I understood, you stayed at that front window during this time frame, a very short period of time, because you wanted to go back and see what was happening from a better perspective. Is that fair?
Yes.
Okay. And I want to make sure I understand the sequence of events that happen when you go back to the window above your bed, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Fiance still sleeping?
Yes, he was starting to wake up.
And you look back out the window, right?
Yes.
And at the point that you get back to the window above the bed, Mr. Ellis and the officer are on the ground from the entire time, from that time forward. Is that fair?
Yes.
Okay. And what you told the detectives, and I think you said yesterday, was while the officer is on the ground with Mr. Ellis is continuing to try to get away.
Yes, the struggle was still going on.
Okay. And by struggle, you mean the officer is still trying to restrain Mr. Ellis?
Yes.
And Mr. Ellis is still trying to twist away or...
To get free of the restraint, yes.
And was it during that second time of the window above your bed that you hear Mr. Ellis say he can't breathe? For the first time. I should say for the first time. You heard it multiple times.
I do not recall.
That's okay. But is it fair to say that he's still trying to get away with the officer on top of him when he's saying, I can't breathe?
Yes.
Okay, so he's not restrained yet.
He's still physically being grabbed and trying to be held down.
Okay.
So not in restraints, but still being restrained.
What you told Detective Rue on the exhibit that I provided you is that Mr. Ellis was not laying still. He was not complying with getting arrested. He was still trying to move, and the officer was still moving on top of him to get him to stay, to be placed under arrest.
Yes.
When you first heard him say, I can't breathe, right?
Yes, I believe.
And then the detective asked you, is Mr. Ellis rolling from side to side while he's saying that? And your response was yes, right?
I believe yes.
Well, you can turn to page 21 of that exhibit. And from lines 19 down to 26, you're describing what I just reported you telling the detective, right?
Yes, the detective's words were rolling side to side. And then he said moving, trying to stay on top of him, and I said yes.
Right. So your yes was responsive to the officer trying to stay on top of Mr. Ellis while Mr. Ellis was going side to side on the ground, right?
While they were moving around on the ground, yes.
Okay.
I would not use the word side to side.
That was the
Yes.
detective's word, right?
Yes.
Okay. And is this during the first time that you hear Mr. Ellis saying he can't breathe? Second time? When is this in that sequence? Because if I understood correctly, you said He said it a couple of times initially, and then said it a couple of times a few minutes later.
I do believe that is when the first ones were.
All right. And on line 25, the detective's clarifying because you said yes to his characterization of Mr. Ellis going from side to side. Do you see that?
Yes.
And his question is, and that's happening the whole time he's on the ground. That was his question, right?
Yes, I saw him struggling to get away the whole time he was on the ground.
Right. And your response was from the whole time that I saw.
Yes.
Okay, so you're agreeing with that
Yes.
question. Okay. All right. What you also told the officers is that the entire time that the officer and Mr. Ellis are on the ground, they're simply trying to arrest him. Is that fair?
Other than the punch and the kick that I attested to.
The initial punch and kick before they were on top of him, is that correct?
Yeah.
That was a bad question. Let me ask you a different question. If I understood, you saw the maybe two punches you described yesterday,
Yes.
and the one kick as they're trying to get to the ground, or is Mr. Ellis already on the ground?
Mr. Ellis was already on the ground.
And so that was the initial action by the officer you saw before, then they're on top of him trying to restrain him?
Yes.
Okay, that sequence is accurate?
I believe.
Okay. All right. And after the initial couple punches and the kick that you described, you told the officers, the detectives, during each of your interviews, that the officers were then just simply trying to arrest Mr. Ellis. Is that fair?
Yes. As far as I could tell.
Do you remember telling the officers that once he was restrained, that the officers had Mr. Ellis kind of laying on his side?
I believe yes.
Well, turn to page 24 of that exhibit, please. On lines 11 through 12, the detective is asking you, can you tell how Mr. Ellis was positioned on the ground from your vision and from your viewpoint? Was he on his side? Was he laying on his back, his stomach? And your response was, kind of like laying on his side.
Yes.
And so that was in reference to once he was restrained, correct?
What are you defining as restrained? Because in the whole time that I saw him, they were attempting to restrain him, and the only time that I saw it completely calm down and have him completely restrained would have been when all of the responding police officers came.
3 or 4 minutes later, right?
3-ish minutes, yes.
Ballpark. That was a good question. So when I say restrained, so once the officers kind of have a little bit more control of Mr. Ellis,
Yes.
before all the other people come,
Yes.
Mr. Ellis is laying on his side, right?
Yes, I believe.
And then later in the interview, you are specific about once he's restrained. You said that, and the other officers are there, that as far as you could tell, they weren't on top of him, right?
Yes.
The officers were never laying on top of Mr. Ellis once he was in custody, right?
I was not able to see that. I could see that some of them were down on the ground still holding him, and I could see that there was bodies blocking the majority of the view.
Kind of what we saw in the video there?
Yes.
Okay. But what you told the detectives, if I could have you turn to page 30 of Exhibit 866. And for context, the officers are talking about once things calm down and the other officers are standing around. You see that on line 32?
Yes.
And you're confirming that Mr. Ellis is still on the ground at that point, right?
Yes.
And then on the top of the next page, you say, as far as I could tell, they were holding him, but like they weren't on top. Not that I could see, right?
Yes, I could not physically see any of them on top of him.
You clarified actually, they ask another question because they're trying to figure out what's going on with Mr. Ellis, right, at that point in time?
Mhm.
And the next question, they say, describe that holding for me. What did you see that indicates to you that they were holding him? That was the next question, right?
Yes.
And your response was, they knelt down to the ground, him on the ground, arms out on him, right?
Yes.
Is that what you saw?
Yes.
Their knees were on the ground and they had their hands on Mr. Ellis, right?
Yes, at that point.
And then, during Mr. Fricke's interview with you, with the investigator, Mr. Bone, you were asked about how long from the initial sound that caught your attention to the time that the other units arrived, however many officers are there during that time period we're talking.
Yes.
And you said that was about 3 or 4 minutes total. Do you remember saying that?
Yes.
Does that seem accurate, ballparkish?
Ballpark.
Okay. And I think what you said, and I think you've actually testified to this, there was a second period in which Mr. Ellis is saying he can't breathe, right?
Yes.
And then that second period in which he's saying he can't breathe is when the other officers are there 3 or 4 minutes later.
I do not believe. I believe that all of the I cannot breathe was before the responding officers.
So which ones? Because if I understand, there was another unit that arrives and you saw 2 people run?
After the 2 officers had arrived and ran over from the diagonal corner, I did not hear anything else.
Okay.
So that I cannot breathe would have been before the 2 responding officers, before the mass response.
Okay. Make sure I understand. So when you said that you're 2 series of I can't breathe a couple minutes apart, that was all before you saw the second unit arrive? Is that
Yes.
Okay. Okay. And do you know if he said? Oh, I guess you couldn't hear him say it. It happened after that, right?
I did not hear anything after the rest of the officers came.
Okay. All right. Thank you. That's all I have.
Okay.
Ms. Brimmer.
Thank you, Your Honor. Well, I made it, Your Honor.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
I want to start by asking you about your observations during the period of time before those other 2 officers arrived.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to start with, you saw and heard a major struggle with the officers and Mr. Ellis. Is that right?
Yes.
And you only witnessed 2 officers with 1 patrol vehicle on the scene during that initial struggle. Is that correct?
During the initial struggle, there was 2 officers, but I was only aware of 1.
Right. And you only saw 1 patrol car.
Yes.
And just so we're clear, if that's the point you believe you heard Mr. Ellis say, I can't breathe, during that initial time before the other 2 officers arrived.
Yes.
You wrote a statement, 897, which is your handwritten statement, right?
Yes.
To help you today in court.
Yes.
You a little nervous?
Yes.
You don't seem like it, but I just thought that was a great idea to do this.
Thank you.
Thanks. And I wanted to ask you about what you said in here, too, on that same issue.
Mm-hmm.
You said, I heard him repeat a few times he couldn't breathe as well, and I heard another taser arc buzz. And then you said about a minute later, I saw another unit arrive, and 2 officers run from the corner diagonal of the original unit.
Yes.
So the I can't breathe was before those 2 officers ran diagonal, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And once the second officers arrived, you really quit watching what was happening. Is that fair to say?
Yes, for the most part.
And after the other patrol cars arrived, you did look out your window on a couple of occasions.
Yes.
And there were multiple officers around Mr. Ellis.
Yes.
As far as you could tell, the officers were holding him, but they weren't on top of him at that time.
Yes. The officers that I could see holding were holding with their arms.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that, please?
The officers that I could see holding him were holding him with their arms.
Can you show the what you mean by that?
If you pull up the video of
Is that
the
222?
first video, you can see one of the officers.
All this technology.
This is very grainy from this.
Yeah.
This right here
Somebody
is
in the
an
middle of that dog.
officer that is,
Do you want them to stop it?
yeah, you can't really tell. There is an officer that is knelt down right here, and you can see their arms outstretched.
There's an officer that's doing what?
That's knelt down
Got
over
it.
here
Okay.
amongst the circle with his arms outstretched.
And what are his arms outstretched doing?
They are outstretched onto Manuel Ellis on the ground.
But no one's on top of him, is that right?
Not from what I could see, no.
Thank you. You took a couple of cell phone videos when you looked outside, is that right?
Yes.
And you took those after the responding officers had arrived.
Yes.
In one of those videos, Exhibit 22, we've just gone through that, excuse me. Got a little ahead of myself. You don't know whether any officers were actually touching Mr. Ellis after you started taking videos. Is that fair to say?
Yes, in the interview I might have said that I was not able to recall that.
And then you said something we hear in the video. You used the words doggy pile. What did you mean by that?
A group restraining. It was more a figure of speech. I did not expect it to be in a courtroom at any point.
I totally get it. So, okay, a couple of final things. If we could look at 223. Got twos in front of everything. 23. Thanks. Showing you what's been admitted as Exhibit 23. It's sideways.
Yes.
Alana? Thank you. Showing you what's been marked and admitted, excuse me, as Exhibit 23. Are you aware that the person that we see in this administering CPR on Mr. Ellis is Officer Timothy Rankin, our
Objection,
client?
lack of foundation on.
I'm just asking if she's
She's
aware.
asked if she knows.
I am not aware of who any of the officers are.
And just to finish my question, are you aware that the officer administering CPR in this video, Mr. Ellis, is Officer Timothy Rankin, who is trying to save Mr. Ellis' life?
Your Honor, objection.
Yes.
Move to strike.
The answer.
You can answer.
No, I'm not aware.
Thank you. We can take that down. Finally, Officer Rankin, our client, is behind me here. Do you recognize him at all from the night of March 3rd, 2020?
No.
Thank you. That's all I have. Thank you.
Redirect, Mr. Lewis.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Mallang, good morning.
Good morning.
Well, we're watching the video, I believe Exhibit 22, with the officer standing around. You described an officer down towards Mr. Ellis, is that correct?
Yes.
Could you actually see where that officer's knees were?
Objection, leading.
I'm sorry, what was the question again?
Could you see where that officer's knees were?
What he was leaning toward?
His knees. Where his
Or his knees were? You may answer.
No.
So you can't tell whether that officer's knees was on Ellis' bathroom. Is that correct?
Objection leading.
I'll sustain that objection.
Again, you couldn't tell where the knees or whether it's on the ground.
I could not tell where the knees were located.
Your Honor, no further questions. Thank you, Mr. Mallang.
Mr. Fricke?
Just to follow up on some of what was asked over here. Ms. Mallang, when you described about hearing the words I can't breathe, he was yelling it and it was very loud, correct?
Yes, he was loudly pleading.
And that was a situation where it was so loud you couldn't tell if he really couldn't breathe or if he was just trying to continue to escape. Is that right?
It had a level of panic to it, so I'm not sure.
You don't know. Okay. Thank you. That's all I have, Your Honor.
Mr. Usher? Ms. Bremer?
Nothing further. Thank you, Your Honor.
Mr. Lewis? Okay. Ms. Mallang, you may be excused. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Did you guys want to do something with this?
Yeah, why don't you give that to me? Thank you. Yeah, get us all our little cords off of it. Thank you. Okay, next witness. Yeah, earthquake drills are done at any time, but we're not going to leave the room. I mean, we don't have to. We're not required to participate. We're not going to. So if you hear any funny noises or something, don't get too exercised. It's the National Earthquake Drill. Anyway.
Your Honor, the state calls Mr. Steve Wilkins.
Yes, sir. Would you please come forward right about here? And raise your right hand to be sworn. Solemnly swear or affirm that your testimony in this cause will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
Thank you very much. Please have a seat right here. Please state your name and please spell your name.
Stephen Wilkins, STEVEN WILKINS.
Good morning, Mr. Wilkins.
Good morning.
You currently employed,
No,
and are you retired?
I am retired, yes.
And what was your prior occupation?
I was the forensics manager for the Pierce County Sheriff's Department.
Can you tell the jury what that entails as far as what your duties were?
I supervised the forensic investigators and forensic techs and other office staff in that investigation unit. We had two primary responsibilities: crime scenes and then fingerprint and palm print identification.
And when did you actually retire?
June 30th, 2022.
How long were you with the Sheriff's Department?
30 years.
And in those 30 years, did you always work as a forensic investigator?
Investigator until 2005 and manager from then on.
So 2005 to 2022, you were the manager?
Correct.
And on March 3rd actually March 4th, the morning of March 4th of 2020, were you on duty that day?
I was during the day, yes.
And were you on call that early morning hours?
Yes, I was on call for that week.
And can you tell the jury what that means to be on call when you were in that position?
The investigators and myself during that time would go on call at midnight on Sunday and go off on call the next midnight Sunday. So basically for a week. And if you were the one on call, if an incident occurred for forensics, you would be the first to respond, and then depending on the situation, you would get other investigators there to assist in the investigation.
And what type of situations or scenes would you respond to that would require more than one investigator to respond?
Homicides, shootings, robberies with injuries, mostly all the real serious crimes.
Did you have the opportunity on the 4th of March of 2020 to become involved in the processing of a scene at 96 and Ainsworth in Tacoma?
Yes.
How did your involvement come about?
I got the jury phone call that woke me up to respond to the scene.
Do you recall approximately what time that was when you were called?
No, I don't.
Did you write a report in this case to document the actions that you took?
Yes.
And would it assist you to refer to your report in order to refresh your recollection as to what time you were dispatched and the actions that you took?
I can look and see if it shows that.
Just a minute. Your Honor, just for the record, we had a 713 that we substituted this morning with one that did not have a redaction on it. So the only change is there's no redaction, but it is listed as Exhibit 713.
No objection.
This is the new one. That's the new one. That's the one you want. So, Your Honor, I'm going to remove a tag.
Do you agree that we should replace the one exhibit with another? Everybody on the defense side?
That's
This
fine.
redaction is going to remove. Refresh his recollection.
Yeah.
All right, there's no objection to that. Mrs. Winnie, you're authorized to.
Mr. Wilkins, I'm handing you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 713. You can take a look at that and let me know if you recognize it.
Yes, this is my initial report that I wrote concerning this incident.
And did you review that report to see if it assists you on the time in which you were dispatched?
It only reflects the time I arrived on the scene.
If you look at the bottom of page 7 of 8, there's one line in the start of your narrative.
Correct.
And what time were you dispatched on that?
Oh, okay, I see what you're saying. It says I was dispatched at 0031 hours, so 31 minutes after midnight.
And then what time did you actually arrive at the scene?
I arrived at 0113, 1:13 in the morning, sorry.
And what was the nature of the call?
The death in custody with Tacoma Police Department.
And when you arrived at the scene, who did you initially contact?
Lieutenant Tony Messinio.
And is Lieutenant Messinio, was he with Pierce County Sheriff's Department?
Correct.
What was the purpose of contacting him?
Just to make contact with somebody at the scene who hopefully could direct me on what we were supposed to be doing.
And what information, if any, did you gain from Lieutenant Messinio?
You unobjected hearsay.
Sustained. You can ask him what he did afterwards.
Right, thank you. When you arrive at a scene and you are there to document evidence and process the scene, do you rely on information that you receive from the officers on the scene for what to focus on in your documentation?
Yes.
And did you do that in this case?
Yes.
And was Lieutenant Messinio the individual that you spoke with to direct you as to what to do?
Yes.
And in general, what were you directed to focus on?
I was directed to focus on the scene. There was a Tacoma police vehicle and a gentleman laying in the road. Was also told, reiterated that it was a in custody death, and did our job from there.
And what?
We did our job from there.
Were you advised at all about how the in-custody death occurred?
No.
Were you advised at all regarding the nature of the restraint that was used on the individual?
Sorry?
The nature of the restraint that was used on the individual? It's relevant as to what he was focusing on for the photographs that he took, Your Honor, and marks that may have been present.
I'll sustain the objection.
So you indicated that there's a patrol vehicle that was present at the scene. At any point did you observe a deceased individual at the scene?
Yes.
And who was that individual?
Was told it was Manny Ellis.
And when you first arrived at the scene, what observations, if any, did you make of Mr. Ellis?
He was laying on his back in the road. He was covered with blanket, typical you'd find from fire response. There was emergency medical supply debris around the body, and then there was also the Tacoma vehicle there.
And were you lead investigator as the manager when you arrived?
Typically, the senior officer is the lead. Sometimes those get passed around depending on expertise that may be there, but at this one initially I was the lead. Yes.
And was there any other investigator that was assisting you on the scene?
Yes, Steve Mell, forensic investigator, was also on the scene.
Is he also with Pierce County Sheriff's Department?
Correct.
And did you document the scene by taking multiple videos of the scene?
Yes.
And when you prepare to take those videos, are there certain views that you typically take?
Videos are used to be more or less overview of the scene, so we try to, with the videos, capture as many of the pertinent angles that would depict the scene. So there are overviews from the angles of that scene.
And if I can have State's Exhibit 604 presented to the witness only. And Mr. Wilkins, if you can view that on the monitor in front of you and let me know if it's true and accurate recording of what you observed that night.
Counsel, we can't see anything on our phone.
I don't know if yours is unplugged, but
Did you unplug it?
that's probably it.
Is it working now?
Yep.
Thanks, thank you.
Great.
You're good? Thank you. Mr. Wilkins, did you get an opportunity to view that?
It is in a frozen position. It didn't play. Yes.
Is that a true and accurate recording of the scene that you took that evening?
Yes.
Or that morning?
Yes.
And what is the vantage point of where you did the recording from?
The camera is facing south, and into the left hand of the frame is the Tacoma police officer's vehicle. Shows the partial section of the intersection and the house that's on that corner facing south from the scene.
Your Honor, State offers into evidence 604.
I'm sorry.
State offers into evidence 604.
604, is that what this is?
That's
Is that
what
what
this
you
is.
said? Okay,
Can I ask counsel a question, Greg?
sure.
you recall if there's any audio on these videos?
No, there is not.
No objection.
No objection.
604 is admitted.
Permission to publish, Your Honor?
Proceed.
And if we could have, for the witness only, State's Exhibit 605, please. And Mr. Wilkins, I'd ask you to view this video, and let me know if it's a true and accurate recording of the scene that early morning hours.
Yes.
It is.
Yes.
And what's the vantage point of that video?
It is the same vantage point, but it's a pan of the scene starting more extreme to the east and crossing through the scene and ending up looking west.
State offers into evidence Exhibit 605.
No objection.
No objection.
605 is admitted.
Your Honor, I would note that our tech is advising me that there is audio on this.
Oh, there is. Okay.
Was there audio on this one but not on the other one?
The other one did too. The other one did have audio. He did not publish it because it wasn't addressed. So
Sorry.
I don't know if
Did it affect anybody's view of this?
Well, we need to listen to it first.
I mean, did you not listen to it already?
We have sometime.
So, what's the problem?
Well, I just want to make sure that the comments, again, there's nothing objectionable, but the comments have been made by the video.
Well,
I don't believe that there are, but I want to observe.
Your Honor, I think it's time for the earthquake drill. No?
I think we're past it. I'm not sure we had any notice of it.
I don't have any objection.
It was supposed to be at 10:19. It's now 10:34. Ms. Purcher, I can't stop every time there's something you guys want to look at a second time. You guys have had this stuff for a long period of time. Presumably you know what's on it.
Indeed, Judge, I don't want to just make sure.
How many of these are we going to have?
there's 4 videos that were taken earlier. And yeah.
All right, well, I'll tell you what. We'll take our morning recess a little bit early, and you have an opportunity to listen to all that. And then we'll resume. All right, so we'll take our recess for 15 minutes. Ladies and gentlemen, please do not discuss the case among yourselves or with anyone else. Ellis laying on the pavement, they're taken in a couple of different perspectives.
Judge, can I hand this up to you? I don't want to take them out. Sorry, swing.
Yeah, because
These are exhibits that have already been admitted.
So we're talking about 173, 174, 175, and you're showing me 273, 274, and 275.
Sure. I mean,
And-
there's even more of
Sure.
those types of photos that have been admitted.
Mhm.
And my concern is that it's cumulative. It's the same photos, it's showing the same thing. How many times can we admit it? This is being done also with the, or a number of videos now that have been admitted multiple times as well. So I think we need to keep an eye out on this, and I think it's going to continue to happen unless we start moving things along.
And it looks like the covering that was on Mr. Ellis is disturbed in exactly the same way, for instance. So it looks like that hasn't changed to reveal some additional aspect of things.
Your Honor, those photos that are previously admitted were taken by Mr. Atzet at a different, I just wanted to give background if you didn't know, at a different time than Mr. Wilkins' photos, and some of them are more from Mr. Wilkins at a different angle in addition to the zoomed in versus zoomed out on them.
Well, 173, 174, and 175 are a little closer, that's true. Although, not by much.
Looking through there, there's even more close-ups of Mr. Ellis that have already been admitted as well.
Well, I know there's more closes of him for like his hands and his legs and so on. And of course, his face. 284 is a fairly significant, is a close-up of his torso and head. So what does this tell us, other than that it was taken at a somewhat different time that evening?
Well, it's the condition of Mr. Ellis's body at the time when Mr. Wilkins was there. It also documents that he was there to process the scene for the Pierce County Sheriff's Department, and adds the credibility of his investigation when he was what he documented when he worked.
That's not much.
You know, I leave it to the court on the decision with it. We're not offering through him any of the close-ups of his hands or legs that were taken. We have several photos that we're not offering that he did take that at the scene that we're not putting forward to the court. So.
Well, I guess I have to agree these are cumulative. 173, 174, cumulative of what we already have. It is a slightly different picture, but that's about all I can say about it. It's really just a slightly different picture.
So 173, 174, and 175, we'll have them addressed, but will not, the court's ruling the same.
Yeah, you can certainly say that he took the pictures, you know.
And Your Honor, my understanding from the other stack of photos that we intend to go through with Mr. Wilkins, there are no objections to them, so.
Great. Was there anything more than wind on these audio files?
Talk Mr. Ricky off the ledge, okay with
Okay. All on Mr. Pertzer. Okay. Do we need the witness to have a microphone on him? Do we need the witness to have a microphone on him? It might not be a bad idea to put one of those things on. A couple of those things. Are we ready for the jury now?
Which one? This one, or
No, we're talking about the left.
you want me to have that one on?
It's possible they're going to get you up and stand over there to look at pictures and stuff too. So
I see.
Then this microphone may not pick things up.
Am I good?
I think you're good. Go get our jury. So, Ms. Nicolova, we never got to the point of actually admitting 605, just so you're aware. So you may want to start there. Yeah. I'm sorry?
By you, 605 is admitted.
Well, I don't think I said it out loud to the jury anyway. 604 was.
Yes, that's right here.
604 is admitted, yeah. But 605, I'm not sure we ever got that far.
Yeah, you said it was admitted.
Okay,
I wrote it.
all right. If you wrote it, it must be.
Well, I think he admitted it, and then
And then we started getting
stuff with the audio.
some issues. Okay, well, maybe I'll pick it up from there then.
Yeah. That was less.
Okay, welcome back, everyone. Please be seated. Okay, I think where we were is I admitted 605, and then there was an issue about the audio. And my understanding is you're now withdrawing any objection you have about that? All right, so 605 is in and remains in.
Commissioner Public Road.
Proceed.
before the witness can identify it. Mr. Wilkins, is that a true and accurate reporting of the scene that you took that night?
Yes.
State offers that evidence 606.
I'm sorry,
Objection.
606? 606 is admitted.
Permission to publish?
Proceed.
And Mr. Wilkins, that tripod that's there in the video, can you tell the jury what that is?
That is a 3D laser scanner. It's what we use to document the scene for sketching purposes.
Is it often referred to as part of the Faro or Faro?
Correct. That's the brand name. Yes.
And we just watched the 606, but what perspective is that from as far as where you
Well, I'm standing right there where Ainsworth ends at 96th. It began looking east down 96th, panning across, and then looking south down Ainsworth.
Okay, so that's looking directly down, if you were traveling from 96, or excuse me, from Ainsworth and going into 96.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And so the vegetation that's off to the left there, that's the way it appeared that night?
Correct.
We have 607, please wait for the witness, please. Mr. Wilkins, is 607 a true and accurate recording of the scene that night that you took?
Yes.
And what was the perspective? Where were you standing for that?
I was standing at the southwest corner of 96 and Ainsworth. Began the video looking more north, crossing through the intersection and ending up looking east. Excuse me.
Your Honor, state offers an evidence 607.
No objection.
607 is admitted.
Permission to publish.
Proceed.
And can we scroll back or rewind to where it touches the crosswalk area that goes into the neighborhood to the left? Just a little bit more. And Mr. Wilkins, would you mind stepping in front of the big screen here for the jury? When you're on the scene, you can see there that the scene is taped off. Is that road there? Did you note if the road that goes right here, if that goes into the housing development?
Yes, it does. It's more or less a driveway.
It's more or less a driveway?
Correct.
But multiple houses back there?
Yes. Yes.
And would this be considered basically a crosswalk to go across that
Yes.
driveway?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And just for the record, that's the stretch of sidewalk that runs from the yellow pad on the left to the yellow pad on the right. Do you also take photographs when you're at the scene?
Yes.
And although you identified the Faro scanner to the jury, you weren't the one that did the scans that night, is that correct?
No, I did not.
I'm going to hand you State's Exhibits 152, 153, 156, 157, and actually, I'll just go through 157. You take a moment to look at those and let me know if they're true and accurate depictions of what you observed that night.
Yes.
And in general, what do those photos depict?
They're overall videos from different angles, showing the intersection, the location of the Manny Ellis there laying in the road, and the Tacoma police officer's vehicle.
And just for the record, you said overall videos, they're overall photos, correct?
Correct.
Your Honor, the state offers into evidence 152, 153, 156, and 157.
Okay, 152, 153, 156, and 157 are admitted.
Now handing you what's been marked as 171, 172, 173, 174, 175, and 237. Let me take a look at those, please. And are those true and accurate depictions of the scene and Mr. Ellis that you took that night?
Yes.
Can you tell us in general what they depict?
They are closer up, kind of what we would call medium range photographs of Mr. Ellis there in the road, initially with the blanket over him, and then with the blanket moved to show more of the medical response apparatus, and then some clothing.
Your Honor, state offers into evidence 171, 172. Note the court's prior ruling on 173, 174, 175, and we offer in 237.
Okay, 171, 172, and 237 are admitted.
Actually, Your Honor, if we can have permission to publish 171, please.
Sure.
Mr. Wilkins, you can just step down for a moment, please. Is this photo consistent with the other photos that you testified to as far as being the general location of Mr. Ellis's body at the time when you arrived?
Yes.
Okay. And the item of clothing that's to the left there, the yellow, goldish color, did you also take a close-up of those?
Yes.
And can we have 237 footage, please? And is that the item that you took the close-up of?
Yes.
And did you yourself take those into the pants into evidence?
No.
Did you note anything about the pants?
They had been cut, and usually that would indicate the fire cut those.
Medical response.
Yes.
Did your time at the scene and processing the scene get interrupted by anything?
Yes, we were trying to get other investigators to respond to Parkland Spanaway Precinct to take photographs of the officers involved, and we could not find anyone home. And so I was requested to go to the precinct to do that.
And when you left to go to the precinct to do that, does that mean since you couldn't find anyone to go do that, Investigator Mel was the only investigator left at the scene?
That's correct.
Did the two of you communicate at all after you left the scene?
No.
And approximately what time did you depart to go to the Spanaway Precinct?
I cleared the 96 Ainsworth at 2:28 in the morning.
And when you arrived at the Spanaway Precinct to photograph was involved, did you know the individuals, the officers involved?
No.
And as you sit here today, do you know defendant Burbank?
No.
Do you know defendant Collins?
No.
And do you know defendant Rankin?
No.
Did you have the opportunity to take photos of all three of them that night?
Yes.
And how did you make the determination of what photographs to take of each individual?
When we have an officer-involved situation, we have a kind of a set process we go through to photograph the officers, and it's full-length photographs, front, back, both sides, and we usually also include having them holding their arms up kind of in a formation like this, so that sometimes there's equipment that can be hit if their arms are down, so we take the photographs like that.
Okay, and just for the record, you indicated with your arms crossed but elevated in the air.
Yes.
I'm going to go through those photos with you. We'll start with State's Exhibit 193, 194, 195, 196, and 197. Your Honor, they were shown to them earlier on the break, all of them.
Well, we can show it to you again before we go any farther.
I think other pictures were shown on it, but I don't want to delay the process.
Yep.
Is witness concluded looking at them?
Are you done looking at them?
Yes.
Are they true and accurate depictions of defendant Rankin that you took that night?
Yes.
So now show them to counsel. Okay, so it's 194, 197, is that what we're talking about?
It's 193, 194, 195, 196, and 197.
Did you actually offer them yet?
I was going to.
Go ahead.
The court asked me a question, so I wanted to answer that first.
No, that's right.
State offers and evidence.
No objection, Your Honor.
No objection.
Okay. So exhibits 193, 194, 195, 196, and 197 are admitted, and yes, you may publish them.
Start with 193. We'll just go through each individually. We go to 194. 195. 196. And 197. And Mr. And Mr. Wilkins, when you took these photographs of Mr. Rankin, did you communicate with him at all about what occurred?
No.
You just advised him how to stand and what position to be in?
Exactly.
Did you have any communication with him at all that night other than taking the photographs?
No.
marked as States Exhibit 198, 199, 200, 201, 202, 203, 204, 205, 238, 206, 207, 208, and 209. If you can review those, then let me know if they're true and accurate depictions of Mr. Collins that you took that night.
Yes.
And again, when you took the photographs of Defendant Collins, did you have any communication with him about what specifically to photograph or what occurred that night?
Just specifically related to these photographs.
And what did that communication entail?
Just specifically obviously which way to stand and put their arms and hands. And then usually we will ask in part of the process, not me, usually it's the detective there, which was Detective Alexa Moss. Do you have any injuries or anything like damaged anything? And if so, then those photographs would also depict those.
And at any time during your contact with Defendant Collins, did you request medical aid at all?
No.
Your Honor, state offers into evidence 198, actually 198 through 209, and then 238.
No objection.
Okay, exhibits 198 through 209 inclusively are admitted, as is exhibit 238.
Wish to publish, Your Honor?
You may proceed.
You can start with 198, please. 199. 200. 201. And just real quick, Mr. Wilkins, on 201, are you able to identify at all what that reflective is to the right, on the right shoulder of Defendant Collins?
On the right on his right shoulder,
Correct.
I believe that is the letter E, part of the letter E coming out from underneath his vest.
And in your experience, would that be for police on the back of?
I would make that assumption.
We could have 202, please. And 203. 204. And what was the measurement that you had on that photograph?
There really wasn't a specific measurement. That is a type, the ABFO number 2 scale is what we used for small photographs like that. If at some point that photograph needs to be brought to scale, so we can measure it at that point. But it's just to get the scale in there for that purpose.
Okay, and the scale that you have is done in millimeters, right?
That's correct.
And then 205. And again, is that the same scale that's done in millimeters?
Yes.
We have 238, please. And did is that on the left arm of Collins?
Yes.
And did Defendant Collins bring that to your attention at all?
I don't specifically recall how that was brought to my attention. It may be that I saw it or he was asked. I'm not sure, but we specifically documented it.
And then 206, please. 207? Is that defendant Collins' right knee?
Yes.
208? Is that defendant Collins' left knee?
Yes.
209? And is that defendant Collins' left elbow?
Yes.
Take that down, please. Mr. Wilkins, I'm going to hand you States Exhibit 210, 211, 212, 213, 214, 215, 216. You can take a look at those. Let me know if they're true and accurate depictions of defendant Burbank that you took that evening, early morning hours.
Yes.
Your Honor, the state offers into evidence 210.
Let her finish.
Thank you. 210 through 216.
All right, exhibits 210 through 216 inclusively are admitted.
Permission to publish.
Proceed.
We can start with 210, please. This is defendant Burbank that evening, morning,
Yes.
and 211. 212. 213. 214. 215. And 216. And is 216 defendant Burbank's left knee?
Yes.
And again, is that the same marker that you use in millimeters?
Yes.
I noticed that you don't have any gloves on in any of these photographs. Did you have any concerns for any blood or anything from defendant Burbank getting on you?
They're not relevant.
This concern doesn't matter. Sustained.
When you're photographing an individual and there's substances that can get on you,
Was your issue that whether he's observed any blood?
I can ask that too, Your Honor, but...
Wouldn't that be much better?
Sure.
Let's go there.
Did you observe any blood when you photographed defendant Burbank?
Just the injuries. I didn't observe any blood that I recall.
And
Could you speak up, sir? I don't think everybody heard that.
I observed the injuries. I don't recall observing any specific blood.
and the injury that you're talking about is what's depicted in 216?
Correct.
And when you photographed defendant Burbank, or excuse me, defendant Collins, did you observe any blood?
Just the injuries.
And
The answer would be no.
I'm sorry?
The answer would be no.
And what about defendant Rankin?
No.
Can you take that down, please? I'm handing you what's been marked as 217, 218, and 219. Are those true and accurate depictions of Defendant Burbank's taser?
Yes.
Your Honor, state offers in evidence 217, 218, 219.
So 17, 218, 219.
And Mr. Wilkins, is there a reason why you took photographs of Mr. Burbank or Defendant Burbank's taser?
It had been deployed at the scene, so it's common practice to photograph the taser and for obvious reasons, showing that it's been used. And I recall they can look things up associated with it, but I'm not sure what. I've never had anything to do with that part.
Your Honor, permission to publish 217, 218, 219. We can start with 217, please. And 218. And 219. There's a bit of a glare there, but the 219, is that to take the serial number of the taser?
Yes.
And do you document that in your report?
Yes.
Do you recall if you had to write a supplemental report to correct the number that was photographed?
Yes. In my initial report, when I was listing this item as evidence, I put the wrong serial number down, and I wrote a supplemental report correcting that.
Okay. And do you recall what that serial number is, or would you need your supplemental report to?
I can see it right here on the screen.
Okay. And what is the serial number?
It is X00-349664.
And did that taser ultimately get placed into evidence?
Yes, it did.
And I want to ask you a couple of questions about the items that you did take into evidence, or the items that were provided to you. Do you document those items also on a property sheet or property report?
It's part of the way it is integrated. The property that I submitted as evidence is part of my report. So there's just a section in the front of that is all itemized.
And what items did you specifically enter into evidence?
A cell phone, a EBT card, the taser, some gloves, another taser, another taser, and another taser.
And ultimately, the only taser that was described to you as being deployed that night or being utilized that night was that of Defendant Burbank's?
That's correct.
You indicated that you took a cell phone into evidence. Where did you obtain that cell phone?
Lieutenant Messinio handed me that cell phone when I arrived on the scene.
Did you ever get an opportunity to photograph the cell phone on the scene where it was located?
No.
And what about, what other items, did you ever learn where it was located at the scene even though you didn't get to photograph it?
No.
And you testified about an EBT card that you put into evidence. How did you obtain that?
Lieutenant Messinio gave that to me also.
Did you ever get an opportunity to document the scene and take a photograph of that where it was at the scene?
No.
Was it ever pointed out to you where it was at the scene?
No.
And I'm handing you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 108. You recognize that?
Yes, this is the EBT card that I was given by Lieutenant Messinio that I submitted as evidence.
And you've documented, or it's documented on the bag there that it's submitted by you?
Yes, the evidence tape has my initials, my, we call it unit number that I was assigned when I became a member of the Sheriff's Department, and the date.
And what was the card number that was on there?
You know what? I can't see it, so.
You also document it in your report?
EBT card number?
Yes, Your Honor.
I do not see that I documented the number. Oh, when
Page 8 of 8, I believe you wrote it in the narrative.
Oh, okay. Yes, I wrote the number in in my narrative of the report.
And what was that number?
5077 107 0633 70803.
Your Honor, state offers into evidence, State's Exhibit 108.
Mr. Urbans, did you? Okay. 108 is submitted.
And Mr. Wilkins, when you were back at the scene, did you take any items into evidence besides the EBT card, the cell phone, and you testified to a pair of gloves?
The gloves I received at the precinct. The only thing I took from the scene was the EBT card and the cell phone.
And the gloves that you received at the precinct, who gave those to you?
I don't recall. Let me see if I wrote it down here. It appears that it was Officer Rankin's gloves that I took as evidence.
Officer Rankins,
Yeah.
you said?
Yes.
Did you take any of the defendant's clothing into evidence besides those gloves?
No,
Why not?
wasn't requested to.
And who would have requested it of you?
Detective Moss would have requested that.
When you were at the scene, you testified that you didn't take any other items into evidence. Did you ever look at the patrol vehicle?
Yes.
And what observations, if any, did you make of the patrol vehicle?
I was looking for possible damage or evident fingerprints and did not see any.
And why didn't you have the patrol vehicle taken into evidence for processing?
That decision would have been made after I left the scene.
Did you take any photographs of any hobbles at the scene?
No.
And why not?
I did not know they existed.
I'm sorry.
I'm having trouble hearing the witness.
Is that thing on? Is this thing working?
I haven't. Could you ask that question again? Yeah, it's not on.
It doesn't sound like it's working much. Is this thing turned on, the little button on it?
Yeah.
Is the green light on?
There is no green light. I have it on, but there's no green light. Oh, there's a green light in the front of it, yeah.
Okay.
He's using the.
All right. Anyway, continue.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Your Honor, can I have permission to publish 108, the EBT card?
Yes.
And I'd ask the witness to open the item, please.
Fine.
And also Or can the jurors have permission to take it out of the bag if they wish to view it out of the bag?
EBT card?
Yes. It's hard to see in the bag because it has all.
Can I ask you why does this matter?
Your Honor,
It's not in dispute, is it?
We're not speaking to you.
It's not an issue in dispute, so no, I think it's better that they not. If they want to hand it around, that's fine.
They have it too.
Can you proceed with another question?
Sure, Your Honor. When you received that, Mr. Wilkins, the only information you received was from Lieutenant Masinio?
That's correct.
I don't have any further questions.
Mr. Bircher?
Yes, thank you.
Cross-examination.
Investigator, good morning. I want to show you a couple of other photographs, if I might. Your Honor, maybe I freely roam and contact you.
I don't know how freely you want to roam, but
Within the well of the area.
there you go.
Thank you, Judge.
That's fine.
Okay, let me hand you the binder and see if you recognize some of the other matters or items that were photographed. Sir, you were there with another investigator, correct?
That's correct.
And that was Officer Mel or Investigator Mel?
Forensic investigator Mel, correct.
Right. And you're his supervisor,
Yes.
is that correct?
Yes.
And he is working with you, and it sounds like the two of you work together in the city.
Oh, yeah.
And so, just for kind of a information standpoint, when you come to any type of a scene, you are there to take photographs and videos, and also the Faro scanner, if that would be something to be used, correct?
That's correct.
And so you are taking direction of what to video or photograph from other officers that are present?
At times we are being directed. At other times it's on us.
Okay, you've done it enough times, you know what might be important for purposes of
Over 30 years, yeah.
Okay, very good. All right. And so, and I assume that that's the same for Investigator Mel?
Correct.
And just, if you could explain to the jury, what is the difference between the work that you do at a scene and the work that Investigator Mel did at the scene?
The work that I did at this specific scene was more overall because I did not stay there for the duration of it and had to leave. Investigator Mel was there and had more direction from detectives that were helping out in the case. And he got more intimate and closer up to what actually was physically there at the scene as far as documenting specific items.
Okay. And if you could take a look at exhibits 159 and 160.
Okay.
All right. And first of all, do you recognize those as photographs that you took?
No, they are not photographs I took.
Who took the photographs?
I would assume that Steve Mel took those.
Was there any other investigative person there aside from yourself and Investigator Mel?
No.
And so the two of you were charged with taking photographs and videos and things?
Yes.
And with respect to Exhibit 159, can you describe what is contained within that?
It is showing the front half of the passenger side of the Tacoma police officer's vehicle, and on the pavement is a crushed box. I'm not, from that I really can't tell what it says from that one.
Okay. And Exhibit 160.
And 160 is a close-up of that box, and it depicts a Franz raspberry-filled donut box.
Very good. And then Exhibit 162, please.
This is a closer photograph of the passenger front passenger window on that patrol vehicle.
And can you note anything on that window?
There is some white smudging that you can see streaking on the window.
And then 164, please.
That looks like a picture of the same window, but just back a little bit.
All right, very good. It's also the patrol car.
Yes.
Great. And then 168.
That is a photograph of some recycle bin, a couple of recycle bins and a trash can, and there is a looks like a water jug on the side of the road.
Very good. And then 169, please.
That is a close-up, more or less, of the water jug on the side of the road.
Okay. And for our purposes, did you see the various items that are located in those various photographs?
I possibly did, but I did not specifically make note of them.
That's fine. Investigator Mel will be a better person to talk about those.
Exactly.
Okay, very good. All right. Let me take that from you. Thanks. Your Honor, if we could publish Exhibit 156, please. Either pull it out or whatever.
156 been video?
It has been, Judge.
Then proceed.
They're on the screen here first. Okay, Investigator, Exhibit 156. Yeah, go ahead and take a
Oh.
look there with your.
I've got it. Okay.
With your microphone. If you want to come down here, it's fine.
Okay.
Just make sure you speak loudly into the microphone. And what's depicted in this exhibit?
This is a photograph looking west on 96th. You can see the patrol car, Mr. Ellis, the intersection, and all of whatever was right there at that scene.
Very good. And you referenced a box of donuts in one of the other photographs.
That's correct.
And that's what's shown at the lower left-hand corner.
Yes.
Okay, very good. And with respect to except for the items of evidence that you took possession of, you did not take possession of the vehicle or the donuts or the water bottle. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, great. You can go and retake your seat. Investigator, with respect to the items that are collected as evidence, again, do you independently make a determination of what to check in to evidence?
Sometimes.
Okay. In this particular case, did you?
Obviously, the cell phone and EBT card were handed to me, so I was responsible for those things.
Fair enough.
The items that were taken when I photographed the officers, that's kind of a joint effort, but usually being directed by the detective that is running that part of it.
Okay. And with respect to, you talked about when there's an in-custody death investigation, it sounds like there's certain photographs that are protocol.
Correct.
And the photographs that you took of deputies Burbank, Collins, and Rankin, those are the photographs that you took per protocol, correct?
Correct.
And within those photographs, you took photos of the officers' front, side, and back, both sides, front and back, correct?
That's correct.
And is it your understanding that with the photographs that you took of the uniforms were what they were wearing at the time of the event, that earlier evening?
That's correct.
And so they were transported apparently from the scene to where you actually met with them later.
Yes.
Where was it that you met with them later?
It's a Parkland Spanaway precinct that's on Pack Avenue.
Okay, what is the cross street, Jim? If you
I'm thinking it's like 164th and Pack Avenue.
okay, so it's a ways away from where you're at.
Oh, yes.
Okay. And so they were transported from the scene in their uniforms to that Pacific Avenue location.
That's correct.
Okay. And with respect to the photos, specifically the front and the back, they both say police. Small emblem on the front and a large emblem on the back, correct?
That's correct.
So would that be visible to a person who was paying attention to any conflict that they have with police officers?
Yes.
Whether, in your opinion, would there be any understanding or misunderstanding that that these individuals were police officers that evening?
Yes, Your Honor, always.
Okay, go ahead.
Would you repeat that question?
Sure. Would there be, in your opinion, would there be any misunderstanding that these individuals were operating and working as police officers that evening?
I would not have that misunderstanding.
Okay. And you also collected 4 tasers, correct?
That's correct.
And who were the tasers collected from?
Officer Rankin, Ford, Collins, and Burbank.
Okay, was Officer Ford out there at the scene as well?
I don't know.
Okay, you did not take any individual photographs of Officer Ford that evening?
I did.
Okay, did you take individual photographs of him out there at the, I'm sorry, my question was poor. When you were at the Pacific Avenue location, were there 4 officers that you were in contact with?
Yes.
Did you take photographs of Officer Ford as well?
Yeah. Yes.
The same series of uniform photographs that were taken of the other 3 officers?
Yes.
Yeah, excuse me, just one minute. Your Honor, I would offer exhibits 159, 160, 162, 164, and 168, 169.
Objection.
I'm sorry, 154, did you say?
I'm sorry, 159,
159.
160,
Mm-hmm.
162, 164, 168, and 169. Objection.
Objection.
Your Honor, if I could voir dire the witness on the 2.
Sure.
Mr. Wilkins, on 159 and 160. Just back up to me. On 159 and 160, do you have a recollection of those items, the patrol vehicle and the donuts?
Not personally, no.
And on 162, the patrol vehicle,
No.
do you have a recollection of seeing that on the patrol vehicle window?
No.
And you testified earlier you didn't take any of these photos.
That's correct.
And on 164, do you have any recollection of seeing that on the patrol vehicle window?
No.
$168, do you have any recollection of seeing the water bottle and the location of it at the time?
No.
And what about 169, the photo of the close-up of the water bottle. Do you have a recollection of that?
No.
Your Honor, it's a state's position that those photos would be better addressed with investigating law.
Your Honor, perhaps I can answer a few more questions.
Sure.
Investigator, the photographs that were shown to you, these last series of photographs, were those photographs taken at the scene that evening?
Yes,
Okay. And you took the general overview photographs.
that's correct.
And one of the photographs that you took was of the donut box next to the police car.
I'm sure it's depicted in there, but I was not zeroing in on that item. But I'm sure if it's there, it's going to be in my photograph.
Fair enough. And then the close-up photo taken by Mr. Mell is just indeed a close-up of that donut box closer to the patrol car, correct?
Yes,
And then there's a picture of the window.
correct.
And that's the same patrol car that was present when you were present there.
Yes,
And then the other photograph that showed the water bottle, that was part of the scene, correct?
yes.
All right. When you arrived, who was present at the scene?
There was Sergeant Sanders and Lieutenant Messinio from our department, and that's all that I recollect.
Correct. Those are Pierce County Sheriff deputies, but there's Sergeant Lieutenant, correct?
Correct.
All right. And so they are supervising the scene at that point.
Yes.
The yellow caution tape that we've seen in those various photographs, what is that used for?
That's to use as a barrier to keep unauthorized people from entering that scene, the area that's been considered the scene, so that they don't contaminate it or change evidence or stuff like that.
Very good. And then when you arrive at the scene, you need to check in with somebody, correct?
Yes.
And Investigator Mel would need to check in also?
Yes.
And then when you leave the scene, you check out as well?
Not always, but sometimes.
Okay, all right. When you're checking in, you may or may not check out, correct?
Right.
All right. But all of the photographs that you've been shown were either taken by yourself or by Investigator Mel?
That's correct.
You know, I would read off of those.
Can I see the photographs?
They're
Oh,
back.
sorry,
They're back over there.
Judge, you need the numbers again?
Well, I've got the numbers. I believe these items are documented in the videos that were taken, that have already been admitted.
Yeah.
So, so I will admit exhibits 159, 160, 162, 164, 168, and 169.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, it's now 12:02, so we'll take our recess for lunch. So, ladies and gentlemen, please be back by 1:15. Please do not discuss case among yourselves or anyone else, and do not permit anyone to discuss case with you in your presence.